Welcome to the Manistee Local Podcast, and welcome back to our loyal subscribers, and a warm welcome to all of our new listeners. This podcast is brought to you by our amazing sponsors who make it possible to bring us high-quality content each and every week. We want to extend a big thank you to them for their continued support, and if you enjoy this podcast, please show your appreciation by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Your feedback means everything to us and helps us continue to improve. Also, real quick, I want to take another moment to mention how our sponsors contribute to the quality of our production. Their support allows us to invest in better equipment, top-notch guests, and research, which in turn leads to even more engaging and informative episodes. So once again, thank you to our sponsors, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our latest episodes. I appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoy the show. Cheers. For those that are just now tuning in, why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Great. My name's Megan McCarthy, and I'm the Executive Director of the Lakeshore Children's Advocacy Center. We are located on 3rd Street, so just right up the road from you here. And the purpose of the Lakeshore CAC, we are one of 40 CACs in the state of Michigan and more than 900 in the country. We are a critical part of our community's response to child abuse. So we provide a central location for law enforcement, CPS, medical providers, mental health, prosecuting attorney's office, family advocacy, everyone to come together in a coordinated response to abuse allegations that puts the child at the center of the process.
Yeah, and there's like a bunch of stuff I want to try to unpack here. But,
Okay.
I took a little bit of a deep dive in the website. You and I have known each other for a little while, so I'm a huge advocate and supporter of the Child Advocacy Center.
You've been an incredible supporter of the CAC. We're so grateful.
And part of this is not only to bring additional awareness to what the Advocacy Center does, is also to help kind of kickstart a fundraising drive that we're going to be doing for you guys that we try to do every year. So hopefully we can generate some, because you get your funding predominantly from...
So predominantly from grant money,
Okay.
How it had been in the past. So I think people are like, wow, I hadn't heard of the CAC before, and now I've been hearing about it a lot. And part of that is because we've had to get out front in the public and make sure that the community knows that we're there and what this process would be like if a child were to go through this without a CAC. So our federal funding has been stayed at the same level since 2017,
Wow.
even though we are seeing 3 times the number of cases that we were. Our staff is 3 times the size that it was at that point. So in 2017, what we received from federal and state dollars covered 90% of our costs.
This episode is brought to you by Chapo's Northside Bar, voted best burger and wings in town. Yeah, you heard that right. If you're going to go out for a burger or wings or both, you might as well go to the place that's voted the best. The best. Why wouldn't you have anything less? Look, and if you're not down for a burger or wings, that's cool. They've got salads, wraps, and sandwiches also. And this summer, it's going to get wild, because on June 24th, it kicks off their summer concert series in the parking lot. Live music, folks. And guess what? It's free. Yeah. Come down for the music, stay for the fun, enjoy the best burger and wings in town. Chapo's Northside Bar.
Right, we didn't need to be being part of 5K races and silent auctions
Sure.
and all of those things. Now that's critical. Those same dollars only cover 30% of our costs, and then the rest comes from community donations, from fundraising, and then from patching together private grants through the Community Foundation, through family foundations, through really just trying to make sure that there's no lapse in services for kids, that everything they need we're able to provide. And we're determined to see that through regardless of the funding status.
Is there anything on the horizon for an increase on your federal funding?
We hope. We do have a lobbyist who works with our state chapter who has proposed some bills. We did get some COVID dollars. Those were pretty restrictive on what we could
Sure.
use them for, unfortunately. We could use it to modify our facility, but not in direct services to kids, which is, we would have rather used it to pay our therapist for the additional
Right.
sessions that she was doing with kids who were, spiking anxiety and trauma at that time. But instead, we're grateful for any dollars we get, but We're hoping that there will be a fix to our funding through the Victims of Crime Act, but that's happening on a higher level than in our community.
Well, just the amount of time that it takes to fundraise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yes.
that takes a considerable amount of time away from what you're trying to do, I would
It
assume.
does. And when our staff is fundraising, none of that is allowable through any of our grants, so that's all volunteer time by our staff too. They are not, even in the planning leading up to events, we cannot, be paid for that time. So, and we're happy to do it, but, it is disappointing that this isn't something that our government is throwing money towards. If we're not standing up for the youngest people in trauma in our community, then it's makes me worried where our priorities are.
My heart pounding a little bit, Can you talk about when you started? Now, the Child Advocacy Center here in Manistee was 2009.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we've been an accredited child advocacy center since 2009. Started with a small group of really committed citizens trying to make that happen. We started in the Guardian Angels Parish Center in just a very small location there, and we've expanded over the years. We're now incredibly fortunate in a way that our community is really showing great support for us. We're in a county-owned building. We're in the right side of the District Health Department 10 building, and our county commissioners are allowing us to use that with free of rent, utilities, all expenses covered, which is great. It means that every dollar we raise goes
Right.
directly to victim services.
Wow. That's really cool.
It is, and not many CACs are in that position. We're very lucky in that way.
So I got a bunch of questions, but since
Yeah.
you brought that up, this is just something that was kind of bootstrapped locally? This isn't like something that the city and the county put together?
Well, it's driven by law enforcement, CPS, prosecuting attorney's office. We know that this process runs more smoothly when everyone is working together,
Right.
rather than just focusing on their individual parts. But yes, we're an independent nonprofit. Not every community has a child advocacy center. We are so lucky that in about early 2008, a group of people came together and said, we can provide a better response. We can bring the players to the table and make sure this happens. And I'm sure you already know, but we have an incredible sheriff, an incredible police chief. We've got an incredible prosecuting attorney. And all of these individuals are not only good at their jobs, but they're really compassionate and care about kids. And I think our fidelity to the CAC model is top notch in our community.
And you've been there since the beginning?
I haven't. No, this is my 4th year as CAC director. Before this, I was a teacher at Onekama Schools. This is a way that I can continue to serve kids, but in a new capacity. So it's felt like a great fit. A large part of what I do as director, I always say I have the easy part of this job. It's my advocates and forensic interviewers and therapists who are, day to day working with kids and families. My job is to support them and to work on the fundraising and grant writing part of it. A large part of what I do is writing and grants and donor relations. And my background, I was an English major in college, so using it in a new way as compared to being an English teacher.
Yeah, that's a good way. Can you kind of walk us through kind of the beginning stages of there is something that's happened to a child and from that point through?
Yep, absolutely. Important to note that we don't just have people walking in off the street.
Right.
Like, my child's been abused. Please interview my child. So everything for us triggers from an official report, either from law enforcement or CPS, or if it's a joint investigation, through both. So even if someone does call, and we do get phone calls, I think something's happening, or they're worried about a child they know, we instead direct them to make that report. And it is on our website, lakeshorekids.org, how to report. But let's say a child has made a disclosure to a teacher, to a parent, to a coach, to a neighbor. Something has happened to them. A report is made through the hotline number, typically that's on there, or calling 911, and we get the call. Rather than that child being brought in, interviewed by a police officer in uniform at a police station or in another, what could be an intimidating environment, instead Instead, our family advocate takes that call and then coordinates it with all of the players. So law enforcement, CPS, the interviewer, anyone else who needs to observe that in real time. And then, of course, with the parent and coordinating for a caregiver to bring the child. The child comes in for a forensic interview. It is a neutral, non-leading, child-focused interview process. It is not an interrogation. It's an opportunity for the child at their pace to be able to share their story, to be able to use their voice, which to this point has been silenced. Right. We have 6 contract forensic interviewers, and they're all trained the protocols through the Prosecuting Attorney's Office of Michigan. So it is they follow a very strict protocol so that it will stand up in court, with the goal of that child only having to tell their story once and not have to tell it again and again and risk re-traumatization. So the child and the interviewer are in the room, in the interview room. We have an observation room where law enforcement and CPS are watching in real time, though they do not have contact with the child during that process. They arrive half an hour before. We have a team meeting, kind of go over all elements of the case, and then they are in the observation room. Immediately following the interview, we use a cloud-based storage system that is secure, password protected, encrypted. The interview is uploaded and sent directly to the prosecuting attorney's office, to our medical provider if the child needs an exam, to the therapist if they need to see access, again, so that the child doesn't have to repeat the story. And then the other really important part with what we do is the wraparound services. So it's not that the child comes in for an interview and then we wash our hands of the case. We are with them through the duration of the criminal case and beyond. So we have 2 contract therapists, and then we also refer to Central Wellness and West Michigan Community Mental Health. We have great partners there, and to the tribal therapist for our Native clients. And our therapists are all specific trauma trained, so that we can really work on putting that child and that family on a path to healing. And all services at the CAC are at no cost to children and families. So therapy is available not only for the child, but for the caregiver, for any non-offending family members. Sometimes siblings are having a hard time, struggling to understand what has happened to their sister or their brother. We really try to walk with that family. We also connect them to any resources in the community. While the child's being interviewed, our advocate is meeting with the caregiver to make sure that they feel safe going home. Do we need to help them with those next steps? Is there any food insecurity? Do they need gas cards to get to therapy appointments? Can we go ahead and schedule that first therapy appointment before they even leave so that we can have a better likelihood that we have that follow-up? And then our advocates follow up with that family 24 hours later, 1 week later, 30 days later, 60 days later, for as long as they need us.
Wow, that was a lot.
Yeah, a lot of powerful stuff goes there. And I didn't even touch on case review. Every month we bring together all partners and review all active cases. And then we also have a really strong prevention arm. So you probably, hoping that your viewers saw pinwheels in the ground over the month of April, which was Child Abuse Prevention Month. But throughout the year, we have some really important prevention services. So both Tracy and Chelsea, 2 of our advocates, are also provide adult-focused education, Darkness to Light Stewards of Children. This past month, they did 3 different sessions, 1 in Manistee, 2 in Ludington.
Now, what is that?
It's adult-focused training on how to recognize the signs of abuse, how to respond to a child who discloses abuse, and how to make that report responsibly.
I got to imagine that could be a little bit scary for an adult to try to judge whether or not something is happening to a kid and then taking the step to call someone. And
I think that often adults are worried about making that call and having someone upset with them. We always say, if you have any suspicion, make the call. because that child needs somebody to be their voice and to recognize those signs. We do work with local school districts to be part of their new teacher training and their back to school training. Teachers in the United States account for about 50% of reports. So making sure that that they know the signs to look for is important.
Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by Manistee Firewood LLC. And what a wonderful sponsor to have in this episode of the Manistee Local, because we are bleeding America today. And all Manistee Firewood wants to do, all my guy, Lance, wants to do is make camping great again. He established his firewood company back in 2008, and since then he has been an absolute machine when it comes to firewood. Man, is his wood good. He's got locations all over Manistee County. He's got 5 Blarney Castle gas stations in Manistee County and at the Instant Lunch. And if you're going towards Orchard Beach State Park, you could smell the sweet smells of Burger King in the air right there. The first house adjacent to Burger King's back door is a huge pile of some of the most glorious, dry, fire-ready wood in Manistee County. My man donates to Blessings in a Backpack and Tight Lines for Troops. He's a strong supporter of local businesses. He's also a veteran, which makes it even more perfect that he's a sponsor of this episode. Yeah, Manistee Firewood LLC is veteran-owned and operated. We're winning. We're checking all the boxes for this sponsorship, okay? Veteran-owned. Local boy. Doing it right. Like I said, his wood is hard and dry and ready for burning. Even if you're not going camping. Want to have a little crackle-lackle in the backyard? Manistee Firewood LLC has got you covered. Reach out to my boy at 231-690-1383. 231-690-1383. He'll deliver within 10 miles of the city limits of Manistee. Wild. You had too many beers? You're sitting around the campfire and need more firewood? Manistee Firewood LLC. My homeboy Lance has got you covered. You can check him out on Facebook at Manistee Firewood LLC or anywhere Americans are being American. Manistee Firewood LLC. Get some of that good wood. Make camping great again.
And then the other thing that we started last school year that we are so proud of, Chelsea is providing body safety education and cyber safety and healthy relationship training in school districts. So last year she reached 859 students through a series of 2 lessons, age appropriate, through the same provider that created the adult focus training that we do. It's the Monique Burr Foundation, and so they are, research-based, age-appropriate, tied to Common Core standards. For the youngest kids, it's who are the safe adults in your life. If something were to happen, who do you go to? What are red flags if you see it happening to yourself or to a friend? And how do you speak up for others? Middle school students, there's a heavy focus on digital dangers, right? Because they're all walking around with these cell phones that can lead down to some great things, but also
that's one of the things
dangers.
I wanted to bring up was the social media. Mm-hmm. Even when you started in 2017, it was starting. But I don't think it was at the level that it is today, especially with things like Snapchat. I don't even understand Snapchat, and I'm pretty well dialed into to stuff like that. Yep. But I do see that you guys post a lot on Facebook about what you should do and what you should do. So there is some education that you're providing, like right there on social media.
Yes, please follow us on Facebook, and hopefully you can put a link to that.
Well, I'll definitely put a link to all this stuff in there.
Yeah, we try to use that as community education and also just to provide people a look into what we do. Our doors are locked because we need to protect the confidentiality of the kids who are at the center. So Facebook is something we can use to kind of bring them into our forensic interview room to see our work in action and to learn more about the really powerful work happening. Mm-hmm.
I've been in there, and it's really cool. It's really interesting how the room is set up. It's very like a nice calming space. but you're seeing children as old as 17?
So 3 to 18.
3 to 18.
Yep. And then we also can provide interviews for vulnerable adults, for those who are operating more in a childlike level. Again, if law enforcement feels that having the interview there would lead to a greater disclosure, we're able to do that as well. We also do have some big news. We opened our second location in Ludington on May 1. We've had an agreement to provide services to Mason County. We formalized that in 2021. Our numbers were climbing enough that their agency partners were really pushing for a location closer to home. So we're feeling great about the level of service that we're providing to both communities as well as to the Little River Band of Ottawa Indians. We have a service agreement with them as well, and work with all three of those groups to make sure that we can reach as many children in crisis as possible.
Do you have an idea of why there's been an uptick in your numbers?
I think there's a lot of things that are going on. One likely is the increase in technology, and that people have access to kids even when they're not physically with a child. Pandemic certainly didn't help things. As I'm sure you know, it is very rare that a child makes an immediate disclosure. Very often it's delayed. We are still getting reports from children who are opening up now about things that happened during shutdown, which is wild that it's still following us there.
I believe it though, because you and I talked right kind of smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, and I asked you how things were going at the center, and you said it's pretty quiet. And my gut reaction was, "Oh, that's great." Yeah. And you're like, "No, it's not," because that means, we're not getting the word's not coming to us.
Our busiest month on record yet has been the September after COVID, when kids came back to school and teachers were noticing that a huge swing in behavior from certain kids, and kind of seeing some of those red flags. And then the other element that has led to an increase in cases is actually a positive one. I think that as we have built trust with our agency partners, more of those cases are coming to the CAC. Law enforcement isn't choosing to just interview the child themselves. CPS isn't like, well, I'll just conduct the interview. They've seen the power of this process, and our prosecuting attorney's office is on board as well, because research shows higher rates of prosecution. That's good. When a child is able to make a full disclosure that's video recorded, all of that. So I think part of our numbers, these things were happening, but just not every case was being brought to the CAC. We feel in both communities we are near the 90% threshold. There's always going to be emergency instances in which a child has to be interviewed right away, immediate danger, and we might have a follow-up interview at the CAC, but we do feel like our relationships with the professionals in law enforcement and CPS are so good that that's actually accounting for an uptick as well, which is a good thing for kids.
Yeah, exactly. So like going back when you said that, you try to get it all wrapped up in one interview. That means with your relationship now with like CPS, there doesn't have to be an interview with them.
No, they'll be, they conduct what's called a minimal facts interview. So at the time that report comes through, they're trying to determine, is the child in immediate danger right now? Does the perpetrator still have access to the child? Is this child safe in their environment at this moment? Our schedule looks different every week because we never know what anything's going to look like until our phones start ringing. So from the time that we get that call for an interview, we try to, within 48 hours, schedule the interview. And if it is a crisis situation, we've been there late at night, we're there on weekends, as long as we can get that child in at that time. We're really fortunate that our staff is ready to jump into action at any time.
You've got a child that comes in that's in a situation that they cannot go back home. But that's the only place that they lay their head at night. Are there places that they can go?
Yes, and
you don't have to give up like addresses and stuff like that, but I'm assuming that there are.
Yes, and that is where our CPS, right? That is why they're there too, to determine the safety of placement there. Ideally, we want to connect that child with a grandparent, with a
Yeah.
trusted family, friend, or relative that they can be with. That is the least traumatizing. But yes, there are shelters in both communities that we work with in order to to make the placements for kids when they can't.
How difficult is it to separate a child from the situation? I say that because sometimes I see where there's abuse, and the child is taken away from that situation for a couple of days and then put right. I'm not. What I mean by, as I've just seen it,
Yeah.
and it's hard. The thing is, it's always hard to take a child away from a parent. I guess I don't know how to ask the question without sounding like super callous, but I mean, how do we keep them out of the environment?
I know. So that's not our determination.
Yeah.
We don't make the decision on whether that child, whether or not they're taken away from a parent. That is the role of our Children's Protective Services, and following their protocol and making those decisions. We do think that sometimes in the sessions with our therapist, sometimes it's the caregiver who needs the counseling as much as the child.
Sure.
Sometimes it'll be a mom with a pattern of behavior of bringing unsafe people into the household, probably coming generationally from unsafe decisions that were made prior. Again, we're trying to disrupt that cycle at every point, not just with the child, but also with the family. Our therapist will do family sessions with the caregiver or caregivers and the children, again, trying to kind of establish more healthy behaviors moving forward. But I think with CPS, with us, with law enforcement, the goal is never to separate the child from the caregiver unless that is not a safe place for the child to be. Or unless there's still a lot of questions out there that need to be answered before they can be confident that the child is safe.
Let me see. There was a couple other things I wanted to touch on really quick. The Youth Ambassador Program seemed interesting to me. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
what that is?
I love our youth ambassadors. They are such an energetic, awesome group. So we have representatives from each of the area school districts who volunteer to help us. Sometimes it's a kind of repetitive office stuff, putting together our resource folders, putting together our intake packets, kind of taking some of the burden off of our very small staff in doing those things, but also in volunteering in the all of the different fundraising activities, as well as leading events at their own schools. So in April there was pajama days held in the elementary schools, and our youth ambassadors went around classroom to classroom to get kids excited about that. At the Run the Pier, they've been there to hand out water, and there'll be a kids safety day at the Armory handing out coloring pages, but just some really great high schoolers with big hearts who volunteer their time to help out.
That's really cool. That's really neat. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to touch on? What you guys do that we missed? Anything that you want to cover? Anything you want to foreshadow?
No, we are so proud of the work that we do, and I think that so much of my staff's efforts are not known by the community, and I love this opportunity to sing their praises. We have an amazing team of people who work tirelessly to make sure that every kid, every family that walks through our doors is treated compassionately, respectfully, and that when they walk out of our center, that they know that there is a path forward and that they don't feel like they're walking this alone. So the chance to be here today, hopefully someone who's watching hadn't heard of the CAC before and now is more educated in what we do. Our website is lakeshorekids.org. If we have a ton of information there, and if you click on staff, you can, please, if anyone would like a tour of the CAC, I would love to be able to show them there. There's also resources on warning signs of abuse, how to make a report if you are concerned, and then there is the option when you make that call to remain anonymous. I think it's more helpful if they do give a name, but if someone really is, if that's what's holding them up from making the call that could help a child, that option is there as well.
I think your organization is incredibly important to this community. So we're blessed to have it, blessed to have you leading the charge, and let's make some money for you guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for
James.
coming on today.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It was awesome.
Cheers.
Thanks.